And the other thing is, for those of you who don't know what the infinity wave is, just in a little nutshell, 12 years ago, I received a series of visions, and the last of the visions was the vision spoke about a push of evolution that was coming to the planet. And then the last vision was, if you can see, this is a figure 8 made of flowing water. It's called the infinity wave. It's a representation of an energetic that has been explained to me as 10th dimensional, and inherent in this watery flow. So it's an idea, right? Inherent in this watery flow is 10th dimensional love and compassion, which we can't really conceive here in 3D. But when we apply it, we can see its effects. Kind of like we can't see electricity, but when we turn it on, we see the effect of electricity. So the infinity wave has a transformative, it's just built into it. It's a tool. And it when we apply it to reality, which, as we know, is malleable, it's moving and it's malleable. When we apply something that potent to this reality, things change, things shift, people shift. You can just put an infinity wave in your heart or wrap it around your body and let the water flow, and you don't have to try, but you'll start to feel better. You start to feel calmer, all kinds of things. Anyway, it's a useful tool in daily life. And there were a number of channeled practices that came through that is more of an evolutionary step to use those. So I've used this in my work with the dying, to help them loosen out of their physical form, to kind of loosen their spirits in their physical body, so that they can lift up, kind of like a cradle, like that. And they go out on this beautiful wave of love and compassion. So it's really been fantastic for that purpose. But let's just go back, because Graceful Passages, though it perhaps was intended to assist the dying process, it's really applicable. The first time I heard it, it was 8 years before I met Gary. My pastor at the time, my mother had died, and my pastor gave me this copy. And all it said was Graceful Passages on it. There was no name or anything like that. And I sat down with my husband and listened to it one night. We listened to the whole thing and bawled our eyes out. And I was so moved by this thing. I so moved that 8 years later, when I heard one piece from it randomly at an event, I went, I know what that is. That's that thing about passages or something like that. And anyway, then ultimately I met Gary and I found out the connection, but I already felt like I knew him. He was already my brother, because that piece is so great. But what I was going to say is that after listening to it, and of course thinking of it in terms of my mother's passing, I realized, wow, this is great for any kind of change, for any kind of transition, moving, graduation, marrying. I mean, all kinds of things. We need help in getting from one place to another, one state to another. This is also, coincidentally, what the infinity wave helps with. It helps with change. That's why it's here. It's here to help us through this crunchy time that we all asked to be here for, I think. And it's to elevate, find the calm in the storm in order to evolve through it. So that's how Graceful and the infinity wave really come together.
Yeah, it's beautiful, Hope. I love that you're saying that. I just want to really make it clear as we're entering this description of the workshop and why it's here. We are going to be hosting a workshop in the most beautiful place in Virginia. And it's going to be an opportunity to create a safe container to identify what are the boulders in the road, the sludgy undigested, unmetabolized parts of our loss that require assimilating and addressing in a gentle and loving and safe context that will allow us to do what my Native American teacher, Archon Lashwala, says, which is grief was never meant to be hung out with. It was meant to be dropped in and inflamed with, all the way full lava experience, and then it's meant to be explored, felt fully, and then moved on to what it really wants, which is us to be vessels of joy and gratitude and service. So now we have a tool, two tools, and we're going to create a way for us to explore in our laboratory together of the heart. How can we become more grief literate so that we can become more fully alive? And so I actually feel like we should play the track, the Letting Yourself Be Loved, right now. I know that it just feels like some people who might never experience it, and then we could have some questions, but we certainly can go into what we planned. But if you want to continue as planned, Hope, it's totally fine.
I think we should set the framework a little bit and then,
Okay,
then do that.
Okay. All right.
Because this grief assimilation that Gary is talking about is so topical for us now. I mean, even coming into the last 2 years, we aren't given tools, systems that often to help to move these things along. And so they pile up and they pile up and they pile up. And now we have what we've just all been through. So the need is very great for us to catharticize, if that's a word.
Open to catharsis.
Open
right?
to catharsis. But I like
Right.
catharticize. Anyway, to move this stuff along, and we all need it. It's not Gary and myself included. This is coming from a place of recognizing the human need for it. And I told Gary not too long ago that in ancient Greece, they had the theater. They created the theater just for this purpose. You would
Right.
go to the theater as a community to wail at the plays that were done after wars, and expressing all the grief. And then you'd go to the theater to laugh at the human condition. And it was a healthy way for the community to express emotion and together. And that's even better, when you're doing it in sync. But there's a purpose for, and I'll let Gary talk about this too, but there's a purpose that the grief aspect of this workshop is just the first step. We've got a pathway, we've got a passageway here that with these 4 steps. So that's just the first one. Do you want to talk about the second one?
Yeah, well, but what I want to do is also just create one comment on listening itself, which you alluded to, but we didn't get to. So before we do, that in some ways, the integration of the infinity wave is quite analogous to this new understanding of what I'm having revelations around the power of listening itself, right? And one of the things that happened at the beginning of this year is I was offering these 7 days of rest and sacred renewal with the 7 days of rest program that I offered every day. And I was afraid of playing music more than 2 minutes. Not sure if this is a safe person to bring in, but anyway, you can do that. I was afraid of having more than 1 or 2 minutes playing in Zoom because I had a lack of confidence that we could align the way you can when you're in a room together listening, right? And what I learned was not only can you, but in some ways it was even more powerful with regards to allowing ourselves to sensitize how the listening was affecting our porousness, our connection to the source itself, right? So I just, as an example, I just want to play very quietly, just so you can feel for a few moments how we adapt to ways of being together that aren't necessarily loving or peaceful or compassionate, but we use our heart and souls for that, right? But something happens when we let music, like the infinity wave, soften us. Because the world that we have to exist in out there requires that we harden a lot, actually, a hell of a lot. And not just harden, but myopia. Not only myopia, but it asks us to actually condense and contrast and contract our capacity, the capacity that makes us more human than anything, which is our emotional range. And the culture is actually contracting our emotional range, and in so doing, actually undermining our humanity and our access to it. So this medicine that we're finding is what Hope was saying we need so much, I think is uniquely the path of music. And of course, that's the lens that I listen to, but it must be also uniquely the path of infinity wave. Its purpose is to expand our capacity to be sensitive to the nuances of the emotional range and the connection to the field. And I think I just want you to feel, and in the chat, just chime into the chat. Do you notice even the slightest amount of difference when the music comes in and just leans us 51% towards love, rather than maybe the neutral that exists when there's nothing prompting us? Does anybody know what I mean by that? Just in the chat, I'd love to see if there's any comments about it. It's just about acknowledging that we're in times of that are the forces are hardening, contracting, narrowing, simplifying, sometimes not good, overly certainizing. This opens up this range. And our weekend is going to be about softening to the next step. And the second step that Hope was talking about, perfect that you asked me to be the one to say this, though, because my personal journey has been really thwarted by the lack of step number 2. And I think I am the perfect person to describe number 2, which is a reason why you included me as your guest, Hope, a few months ago. I've been on this journey where self-love and self-acceptance and self-forgiveness has been extremely elusive for me. For 69 years, I have been struggling with how to love myself, how to feel enough, how to accept myself, how to forgive myself, how to, because of course, as a young child, when you have no one bonding with you from the earliest age, when no one's there and says, hey, I got your back, I see you, I'm watching you, I'm going to be curious who you turn out to be. Nobody said that to most of us. But my sensitivity was that because I never had any of it from day one of being a little zygote, there was zero consciousness in my family in that way. So I have on a journey, and my yearning that Hope talked about the things she loved about me was I'm insisting this drive for change. It's true. I think it's because of this component that somehow knew that wasn't the way it was. That I couldn't go to my deathbed having not experienced being able to look in the mirror and go, wow, aren't you fantastic? I love you so much, and I accept you, and I forgive you, and my God, you're so resilient, and you've been knocked down 1,000 times, and you're still smiling. What is that? I could never authentically say that to a mirror before in my life until I started doing some deep work in these last 2 years with plant medicine and my legendary mentoring and coaching pieces, Gerald and Maya Rogers, these people that have helped me enormously. And now I know that the workshop with Hope never happened because I couldn't get past door number 2. Hope, isn't that interesting? I think this is why it's never happened, because number 2 is always elusive. So number 2 is about after you've had a chance to metabolize grief, the natural result is that the obstruction of grief brings you back home to yourself, and you go, wow, I am love. Wow, I am enough. Wow, I belong to me. I belong to God. I belong to earth. I belong, and I accept myself. And in that grace, a new fertile ground is emerging for this third step. And so moving quickly through, Hope, why don't you share about that?
Well, once we're fortified in that wholeness of self-love, and we're not talking about egoic love. It's really appreciation and acceptance, warts and all, of oneself. Nobody else can really supply that but ourselves. And so we'll take people through that. Once we're fortified with that, then we can face just about anything. And that's when we will take everyone through a process of facing fear. And this is going to be very delicate and very loving. It's going to be powerful, and the infinity wave will be a part of this, and so will music. And this is just, it's going to be an alchemical thing. That's all I can say. Because and in deep trust, the thing is that I've been there. Gary has been there. We can help people navigate this. Once we face our fears, once we realize that we've got this, that we've got all that it takes in order to do that, then there's a tremendous relief and release, right? Do you want to do the fourth one?
No, but I want to just say one more thing, because
okay.
you're bypassing number 3 a little bit faster than I'd like.
Okay.
Because it's what I love about this code, which is, we're playing the idea that Jim and Hope had, is this is called the passageway. 3 words, the passageway. We're playing with that idea. This is a work in progress. We'd love to know your comments and your thoughts. But I had an epiphany about why that title might work for what this is. But let me tell you the third one, which is I felt I don't want to bypass. In the same way that, the Bhagavad Gita says that what is the most remarkable thing in all of the world? And the most remarkable thing in all the world in the Bhagavad Gita is each of us dies, but no one ever thinks it happens to them. In the same way, we all have an existential fear of the unknown. And in fact, it's metaphorically related to death, of course. So any way that we can actually make friends with the mystery, actually leaning in to making friends with the mystery, is step 3. And there'll be some initiatory process that we're going to co-create together that will allow us to step into the unknown with courage, with daring, with vulnerability, with authenticity. And it'll be a for real step into the unknown. Because then when you do that, the equivalent of falling back into somebody catching you, or whatever it is, that actually embodied ways of surrendering, the 4th step arises, which is what Archon Lushwala, my spiritual teacher in the indigenous world, has told me about. It's all about getting to joy and gratitude. It's all about getting to connection to nature and to God and to Mother. It's all about being in the space of source connectedness, so that you find out who you really are and what you really came here for, and what your purpose is, and what you're a portal for. So, Hope, how do you want to pick that up before we do your
and what we really envision is that this entire process will build a confidence to be able to face anything. That
change, right?
And when we have that kind of confidence, guess what? We're free. We're free. And so whether this freedom means that we can depart this world and have what they call a good death, or whether this means the freedom to make a decision that is and be completely okay with it, no matter what unknowns lie ahead, to step freely and confidently in the world, I think is what this world really needs, and what we need as souls. We know that the work that we're going to do is going to quicken the frequencies of everybody involved. And to what degree, we can't say, but people are going to come in one way and they're going to leave another. That it is this sense of freedom and joy that is the ultimate aim. So,
Because of time, I want to just say one more comment about the passageway title, and then because I really love to hear comments and questions from you guys. We might basically go between 60 and 75 minutes, something like that. And what I wanted to say about the passageway was the revelation I had today with Hope was because I was not quite feeling the passageway as a term, but then I remembered, have you ever been in wilderness where you couldn't find a path? And actually you needed a machete to kind of like work your way, And I thought, and then you find a path that's more than a deer path. Say it's like really, I can walk through the wilderness now, and with in a way that can enjoy the journey, right? And that's when suddenly I realized it was a good title, because to take the way of the passage that's been laid out for you, is what the purpose of this weekend is about. And that's pretty much the context. I think would you like me to play? Would you like to play the track, or do you want to do a little infinity thing? What time do we have?
No, I think it would be great to play the track. So just to give an example from Graceful, in case you haven't heard it or watched it, now it's got beautiful nature.
And just before, hey Greg, before I play, just really short, really short, just a tiny bit of a moment of what it was like for you when you used letting yourself be loved for somebody. Really short.
I when Hope was talking about this resonance, a real quick example of this was my cousin died at UCSF, brain cancer, and he had been unconscious and in the ICU for a couple of weeks, and they took him off, and we didn't know what would happen when they took him off the life support. But he lived a few more days, and the day he died, I had my wife bring the Graceful Passages CD, and I put it on, and I've done this many times, but in this specific situation, this is how the resonance that Hope is talking about. At about 2:00, I put this on, and I was sitting looking out at San Francisco and listening to this beautiful music, and tears running down my face. And even though I've listened to it 100 times, but as we're sitting there, my cousin was part Native American, and Joe T does the 5th or 6th track on the CD. It's called Walk On. It's beautiful. It's my favorite track. As that song starts playing, my cousin Peter, he's been in this bed. We had a private room. He's been laying there motionless for 3 days. And that song, halfway through, he starts moving. And his wife and his son are sitting there at the bedside with him. And Carolyn, his wife, says, Greg, he's moving, and this Native American music. The next track after the Native American, after Walk On, is the bell, the one with
End of Suffering, Thich Nhat Hanh.
The End of Suffering. The End of Suffering comes on, and at the end of the song, he opens his eyes, looks at his wife and his son, smiles, and dies.
Oh.
At the end of suffering. I mean, and he was studying Thich Nhat Hanh early before he got the cancer, before he had some sort of brain cancer. But
Thank you.
this is a resonance. He was just feeling that music, and it brought him together with this Native American part of him. And then the next thing he does is he listens to his teacher and then opens his eyes and smiles. His wife was jumping up and down. She just couldn't believe that that's how he would. And
Thank
his
you.
son was only 7 years old. He says, "I'll never be afraid of death." After
Amazing.
watching that.
Beautiful.
And so I wanted to keep you on for a minute, Greg, as
Wow.
I just say something. So thank you for sharing that. But for 21 years, my issue has been that people wouldn't want to come to a workshop that focused on, say, even that story, as powerful as it was, because it's a kind of intensity of accepting death as part of life, because it's at the epicenter of death and life, right? So I just want to say that how are we in a coma? How have we contracted to the point where we're not ourselves to the depth of who we can be? So it's like finally clear to me, Greg, that Graceful remember how I've always said to you that it's more than just for death and dying? This is what I'm excited about this workshop. We've found its usefulness beyond and expanding the powerful role it plays for helping people at the end of life.
I think you have to, realize that music is going to do a lot. The two of you are going to be facilitating this and other people, but trust that music is going to touch people. I remember, the reason I got this CD through my sister, who got it from Michael Stillwater, knew a friend of my sister's in Michigan, and my sister lived in California. She was in Michigan and got this CD, and Michael had given it to her, or gave it to his friend, and she knew I was in a hospice, and it got back to me. And the first time I did it, I sat with someone who was dying in her last hours of life, and I just cried through the whole thing.
Thank you, brother. I love you, man. Thank you for sharing. Really
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Greg. Thank you.
I'm going to, because of time, I'm going to share this. And this is a very exciting moment because this is before the titles have been put on. But this is the world premiere of the Wisdom film, The Islands of Inner Peace, that will be premiering this fall on Gaia TV. There are 14 new Wisdom films that I have been working on creating for the last 9 months. And you guys are the very first people to see this Wisdom film letting Louis Epstein, the first track of Graceful Passages, to visuals in a new way. And they're really different than anything we've done before. So I want you to let the visuals distract you. So if you tend to get lost in the visuals, close your eyes and let the audio do its magic. And I'd like you to just hold your heart, the part of you that would really love to be held, as you drop into this, lean into the listening, active, deep listening. Okay, here we go. This is Lou Epstein from Graceful Passages, produced by Michael and Doris Stillwater and me.
No one has ever prepared us for this experience. We think it's the end. not the beginning. It's knowing that you loved. Knowing that you loved. It's not easy letting yourself be loved. Of course, we've learned to judge ourselves. And we're always judging ourselves. But I learned to listen, that I was loved. I was loved. And then I would forget that I was loved. Those were the most painful times for me. Forgetting that I was loved. So you've let yourself be loved while you've been here. And you've judged yourself. And you've forgotten that you were loved. And you became alone. But you will always be here. You are blessed. You are forgiven. You are an angel. You have to listen that you're loved. And you have to forgive all the time. Listen that you're loved. And forgive all the time. You are love. Farewell, my son. Farewell, my daughter. Farewell, my father. Farewell, my mother. Farewell, my sister. Farewell, my brother. Thank you for letting me love you. Thank you for letting yourself be loved. God bless you.
One of the things that I've loved the most about sharing graceful passages in the context of community is it's kind of like letting the cat out of the bag that we all remember that we're going to disappear one day. And something so beautiful happens when we're all stripped bare with that awareness. There's such a beautiful humility that comes from accepting that we're here for such a brief moment. It's such a brief moment. And how can we make this time be the best, most beautiful blessing it can be. Hope.
Yeah, no, I've I didn't realize that somebody else had coined it, but I for years have been talking about living with the end in mind and living with the knowing their bookends, and we've got this time that we tend to forget that there's a bookend at the end. And the books are just going to keep going. It's not like that. There's an end. And once we really accept that, then it changes our behaviors, it changes our thinking, it changes everything. And everything becomes much more precious, and we don't want to waste, right? But that reminder, we need to remember and remember and remember, because in a present moment we'll just forget that kind of thing. So I think, in our workshop, we're definitely going to pull that front and center, so we all get to be naked with it.
And by the way, Leonore asked a question. It's a simple distinction because English is not her first language. And my understanding of Lou Epstein's word, trusting you are loved, which is based on the work of he and his wife Francine, who still does the Trusting You Are Loved workshops, the partnership something. Anyway, it's kind of what I was saying earlier with the step 2 about the self-love and acceptance and forgiveness, is that trusting you are loved. It's like, how do we learn how to feel loved if we've never been unconditionally loved in the way that we intuitively wanted to be when we were children? And I think that's why I wrote in the chat, the only unconditional loving parent we'll ever have in this life is within us.